So first of all, I have recorded this video already and it was 45 minutes long. And I believe it was so long because I spent time saying what I thought of every single book in this series, and I don't think I need to do that because every single book is fantastic. They're all fantastic for different reasons. I do think some books do need to be described a little bit and maybe like some of their backstory. So I'm still going to do that, but I'm going to re-record with much more focus. So a lot of you will know that my friend Erin and Erin is on Booktube and Bookstagram. I will put her information down below. Before we created our joint Bookstagram book club, which is Erin and Danny's book club, I'll link that below as well. We hosted the Erdrich Medicine Read Along, that's our hashtag on Instagram, where we read the Love Medicine series by Louise Erdrich. Now, Louise Erdrich is an Ojibwe author. I'm an Ojibwe reviewer. So if you want to read my reviews, they're all on Voices Reviews. Louise Erdrich is one of my absolute favorite authors. I haven't connected to many pieces of writing as I have with her novel. Every single one makes me feel understood. Every single one contains writing that is so masterful. And I know that sounds a little bit dramatic, but Louise Erdrich is such a skilled storyteller, a skilled world builder. The character building is just immensely intense. You can find family trees online of the Love Medicine series characters and how they're all related, who married who had children with who, and this goes generations and generations back. When I tell you that this is a detailed, multi-layered series, it's no joke. Now, this wasn't a series in the sense that Louise Erdrich sat down and said, okay, this is book 1, this is book 2. Not at all. In fact, the order that we read these in, which is chronological, not publication date. So a lot of people will read this in the publication date. So the first book was published and whatever, they'll read in publication order. But in that way, the storyline of the actual books will be all mixed up. So the way that we read it is chronologically. So in terms of Louise Erdrich fans looked at these books, read the books, figured out which took place in what period of time in the story, and arranged them in a way where you're reading it in an actual like linear timeline of the book events. And so for myself, this was the most immensely fulfilling reading schedule, because when I first read Louise Erdrich, I didn't read these in this order because you don't need to. Every single one of these books was written as a standalone novel because, as I said, Louise Erdrich didn't necessarily set out to make this a big series. She just wrote novels with a really interconnected group of families, because a lot of these take place on the same reservation, so of course it's going to make sense that a lot of the characters overlap, right? But so I had read many of these novels not in a specific order, and I still took a lot of love and appreciation away from them. A lot of them became my favorite novels short after. But now that I've read all of them in this order, chef's kiss. I truly think that everyone should read this series in this order. That's how life-changing it was for me, and I'm not even being dramatic. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you the first 6 books and which order that you can read them in. I loved every single one of these. Every single one is amazing. It's gonna be hard for me not to give my opinion on every single one, so I'm just gonna name them. So first is Tracks, where we're introduced to Fleur Pillager, who is one of my all-time favorite literary characters, as well as Nana Push. 4 Souls, Love Medicine. This is probably the book that you've probably heard of if you've heard of Louise Erdrich. The Beet Queen. This is probably one of the most divided books in terms of opinions on it. You're either really gonna love it or you're gonna be like, take me back to the Pillagers and the Morriseys. Where are the characters I've grown to love so much? But I really enjoyed The Beet Queen. The Last Report on the Miracles at Little No Horse. We really dive deep into the life and backstory of Father Damien, who's a character you'll become well acquainted with in the other books. Gives his character so much depth. It's really an amazing novel. I'm doing it again, but I'm trying to keep my thoughts more concise this time. And then we have The Bingo Palace, which was one of my absolute favorite books in the series. So those are the books that are considered like the main books in the Love Medicine series. And so a lot of people will just stop there. No, no, no. There are other books which are more loosely connected to the Love Medicine series, but are still part of the Love Medicine series. So Tales of Burning Love is a really great book, and this will tie up some loose ends from the Bingo Palace. Next is the Master Butcher Singing Club. I really enjoyed this. It's a really great book. Next is The Painted Drum. I didn't do this to the copy. It arrived like that, but Thrift Books was kind enough to give me a refund. Next is Shadow Tag. You can read a little bit on the possible autobiographical aspects of this novel. It's a really intense novel, trigger warnings for abusive relationships, addiction, and sexual assault. I just realized I left a book out, and I can't remember for the life of me where it comes in the order of things for whatever reason, but I'm gonna post the reading order in the comments below. So it's The Antelope Woman. Now this is one that I want to talk a little more about, and there's a reason I left it, and I had these books kind of sitting aside, which is why I missed it. This was a re-edited, re-released version of The Antelope Wife. The Antelope Wife, I believe, was 1998. Antelope Woman, I believe, was 2016. I had read a little bit online, and Louise had said that she didn't feel right about how some of the characters ended up in The Antelope Wife. I believe that's what she said. I'm strongly paraphrasing here. Now, this is Erin's copy. She mailed it to me, and I was gonna read this and then send both to her so she can read The Antelope Woman, because we wanted to see the differences, even though I know most of the differences, because in our read-along discussion on Zoom, about half the participants had read this and half had read this, so we were able to kind of contrast the differences, and there are very severe differences actually. I'm a little bit scared to read this one because the differences seem a little bit more sad in this one, but I think that if you're able to, reading both is really cool. Okay. So aside from that, we have 3 books that are in the half of the more loosely related, but they're their own trilogy, and they're called the Justice Trilogy. And so these all look at different occurrences, different crimes, different accidents, and what does Indigenous mean in a world that's so dominated by settler society and settler laws and settler ways of justice. So the first is The Plague of Doves. That's the one physical copy I don't own. I ordered it online, and I was accidentally sent 2 copies of Tales of Burning Love instead of Tales of Burning Love and The Painted Drum. So I just bought the ebook. So I don't have that. That's a really great one. For myself, it kind of felt like I was going back and visiting some old friends, which is how you're going to feel about a lot of these books if you read them. Next is another book that you might have heard of if you've heard of Louise Erdrich, is The Roundhouse. This one deals and revolves around a sexual assault and attempted murder. So obviously there are going to be some very strong trigger warnings revolving those topics. But this is such an important book. This was a reread for me, and I really felt like I even got more out of it the second time that I read it. And it really highlights how settler societies' ways of justice can, instead of bringing justice for Indigenous people, it just does the opposite a lot of the times, and this highlights that. And I urge you, if you're uneducated on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit folks, educate yourself on that. And this is what we are currently reading. I'm almost finished it. It's LaRose by Louise Erdrich. I fell in love with this novel pretty much immediately upon reading it. You know, when there's just a novel where like you've read books that you really enjoyed and you liked them, but then you read a book where it's like all you can think about, it's all you want to do, it's how you want to spend your time. To me, that's falling in love with a book. And I fell in love with LaRose. There are some really great scholarly articles you can read about the Justice Trilogy and what Indigenous justice means. And so I'm not going to talk too much about that, but the Justice Trilogy is great. And so that's it. My current time is 15 minutes. So you can just, how much did I talk before? It was unnecessary. I truly believe everyone should read Louise Erdrich, an incredibly, incredibly talented Ojibwe writer. Erdrich's novels are like coming home. They really feel comforting to myself, especially in times of pandemic when I can't go visit my home community. Sometimes I can read a Louise Erdrich novel and feel like I'm going back home, and it kind of takes away a little bit of that homesickness. As I said before, one of the most skilled writers I've ever read in my entire life. Really important to put yourself in a mindset where you're reading an Ojibwe worldview. So as I've said about a lot of Indigenous works, don't go into this with a Western worldview. That'll completely take away from the reading experience. You're not going to get as much out of it. And maybe, you know, some of the things that are said in here you might not understand when it comes to use of Anishinaabe the Ojibwe language. But just embrace it. These are beautiful, beautiful books. And I think that if you read this whole series the whole way through, you're just going to understand so much more about the Ojibwe culture and understand that Indigenous peoples were not a monolith. We have literature from all these different tribes. And I would really love to see people more focus on which tribe they're reading from, instead of just saying, oh, I read this Indigenous book. Say you read this Cree book, this Ojibwe book, because we're not a monolith. And that's why I'm so thankful for books like these. So anyway, let me know in the comments if you've read any of these. If you want to, if you're joining Erin and Danny's book club in our year of reading Indigenous memoirs, which you can read more about on our Instagram page at Erin and Danny's book club. Anyway, that's it. Chimigwech.